tātou I hui mai nei, te raro I te tūnui o tēnei whare, I rungi tēnei whenua, I runga I tēnei whenua rangatira, I pū mau I te Māori a Ngāti Kawa, a Ngāti Rāhiri ki Waitangi, Ngāti Manu, koutou mā Ngāti Rehia, I runga kau tuāhutanga kei te mihi atau ki a koutou. Ka huri atau hoki ki ngā wāhine tō I whakatū I tēnei wāwahi mo te aha, mō te whakaro rangatire pāna ki ngā take Māori I mui a tātou I te tau kei te haramai. He kaupapa hohunu tērā nā te mea, ko te raruraru o Waitangi ke oku nei whakaro, ko te nuinga o ngā mahi o te pauaka whakata, e whakaro ana ki te mahi a te kāwanatanga. Koina te tino raruraru ki au nei, nā te mea, I whakanaro ai te wairu o te tiriti o Waitangi, te kaupapa hohunu e pāna ki tō tātou nei tino rangatiratanga me te mana motu hake o ia I hapu o ia hapu. I runga I taua tuāhuatanga kei te mihi atau ki a koutou, o nā pui nui tonu, I tai mai nei I te rānei ki te tautoko, koutou mā hoki, oriti a hau hei manuhiri I tēnei wāhi, ki te whakanui tērā o ngā kaupapa. Kia ora. I think it's like a pecking order going on down here, and I just had all the tuakana, and I just, as I was reflecting here, I want to adjust a couple of things about why and what we do as activists. I was introduced to activism at a very young age, back at the kāinga where Donna's just recounted from. I have a great love for a woman who's now passed on, Tuhipo Kiriopa, and her and I think, held the Te Arawa section of the activist movement for a long time, with other greats like Mera Tamita, who's also passed on. Paora Maxwell was part of our movement, and Sid and Hannah Jackson were living amongst us at that time. Sid was a rugby player playing for Waikato against my team from Rotoiti quite often, and Hannah, in all her beauty, had established herself in quite a significant role in the way she adorned Māori fashion, and she did the first Māori fashion parade as I was growing up as a child. So activism is something quite often that you don't be in the front line for. So for my first few years of the process, I wasn't at Bastion Point, I was at home looking after their children. I was the one that was told to make the kai for our manuhiri that were coming into us. I was given a flag at about 13, so that's when I started marching up here, and I think I was first trespassed past when I was 15. So that's 10 years after they'd be coming every year, and we'd been getting trespassed first at the roundabout, then by our kaumātua here, then we made it to the bridge, and then we made it up the hill. And I think in terms of intergenerational succession order as an activist, those earliest beginnings have held me in good stead. During the Springbok tour, I was the one at home after they'd done the event in Hamilton, when John Minto came back with broken arms, when Tii Marae our kraua, came back and was then attacked by the police at our kāinga, when Tuhipo and Tame went missing because we didn't know where they were, while they actually demonised us all the while in the paper as groups and individuals that were to be much hated by the state. So when you grow up with that, you kind of develop your own armour against the false dichotomy or the manufacturing of consent of state understanding that the media does. And if you look at some of the early media documentary of this, you'll see that all of my greatest heroes and sheroes and heroines and activists are all painted in the worst light. Back in those days it was the truth paper, and the way Sid and Hannah and Josie and Rebecca and Donna were painted going to Cuba. It was like they were going off to see that dark space. They were going off to see Fidel Castro and to come back with their guns, and they were going to arm a revolution that was going to take back our land. When in fact what they'd gone to Cuba for was to look at socialist strategies of how we could help the poor, how we could find ways to ensure that we developed inclusive strategies of well-being, giving the disadvantage that migration and immigration had placed our mothers and fathers in post the urbanisation movements of the 20th century. And then I naturally fell into that activism, and I became part of them during the Springbok tour. And then I was actually inspired in that activism by someone who I haven't seen for a long time, Liz Marsden. And some of the music was actually that which activated me. And I don't know if many of you know it, but Maranga Mai went around all the universities. It was a play that talked about all of the strategies of land disposition that the others have spoken about. But it was articulated in a dramatic way through music, and it hit every sense of mine. It inspired me to stop thinking about becoming a kupapa bureaucrat in the economics department of some kawanatanga, to actually pursue a career in criminal law to try and address the fact of the way the criminalisation of our people had occurred and had been escalating post the 1970s vanguard of cries for our independence by this group. And it was a very lonely time at that university, even when I was there. I remember there was only 200, I think there was 20 Māori in the whole University of Victoria when I went. And certainly in law school at the time there was about 6 or 7 of us. And I was, when you look back on that, and you look at now to the fact that we got wānanga, and you look at now to the fact that we've got great numbers going into universities, and you've got 500 PhDs coming out almost every year, there has been great advancement. But has it been great advancement in our tino rangatiratanga and strategies of mana motuhake, or has it been about individual enhancement and personal development in ways that drive you to a participation in a Western system, mainly now because of the debt that you accrue as a student, requires you to find jobs and pay money. So you've got to be constantly aware of the colonising machine, and this is something that I grew up in. I think I became notorious or came to light in the national consciousness because my first job after I graduated from university was with Sid Jackson. I worked in trying to establish the Māori Union in Rotorua, and I was part of a group called Te Ahi Ka, which was talking about how we would plant our fires to reignite our cries for Māori sovereignty. And I think we had a visit at APEC conference, and I got charged with sedition anyway, following that conference by Jim Bolger. And then you'd be surprised, actually, some of the people in the middle class and upper class that actually came to help me because they thought there was a pretty over-the-top response to some of the things we were doing at the time. You know, it was actually Pākehā men. I think a lot of the Māori lawyers and Māori judges would walk across the other side of the road when I was actually charged with that. Certainly didn't put any of their hands into their pockets to help me when I got into trouble. It was Pākehā people like the late Mike Bungay, I want to pay them respect, and a number of QCs that actually made sure that I was looked after, and that freedom of speech that should not be denied to all of us when we call out oppression. So that's how I became involved. We did a lot of local work and a lot of local occupations. I think I was 7 at my first occupation at the Kaituna River with my grandmother and my uncle. I can remember my auntie throwing wood at developers as they tried to develop land, which is now where the Ōkawa Bay Hotel is. And they wanted to put a helicopter pad on where our Wāhi Tapu is. So that was kind of the early kaupapa that I was involved in. And over the years, I think I haven't not been at any occupation because I've been the lawyer. That was my job. I was there for the movement to make sure anybody was arrested had free legal advice and had some help for their whānau. Because that's really what you've got to be really aware from. Activists in the front, but the activists in the back are really just as important to make sure someone's at home to feed the kids. Someone's at home to make sure they're going to school. Someone's at home to stop social welfare from getting the kids taken away from the parents while they're on the front line. And I'm a part of that vanguard of leadership and support in the movement. I really want to pay homage to those people, because a lot of them, like Nahui, are children of the movement, and it's bloody hard. You know, your parents quite often are out facing the front line. I know my own children, even at Kohanga Reo, were asked questions like, he hai pēnei ai, pērā tō mahi o tō mama. You know, why is your mother protesting? She's got all these degrees, she could make real good money and go off and be a judge. Why is she doing all those things? Our kids feel the whakama of that discrimination against the things that we do. So I always come to these forums that are organised by our rangatahi, because I recognise their childhoods and their youth sometimes was taken away by the hatred, the white hatred that was inflicted on our families by the ignorant and those that actually design comments to hurt us. So I want to move to some of the topics here, because they've certainly been provocative. I'm a lawyer that spends a lot of time in court, momo taima te nunga o te wā. But I go there to try and find a way so that we can interface with tikanga Māori, our own legal system, and push our systems back to the way we make decisions. I know that Sharon talked about, and Claire, you talked about, why are we making claims up to each other? Well, my question to both of you is, why are we going to courts to have white judges define those claims? Why aren't we having more wānanga for us to actually sit this out? And exactly the framework of those claims are being set out within Pākehā law, which sometimes pepper pots the odd Māori value like mana, or manaakitanga, or kaitiakitanga, while the real engagement of Māori law, which is sitting down and understanding the whakapapa connections, is left to be decided upon by people that don't even know what whakapapa is. And that's Māori judges and Māori lawyers too. There are so very few of the 500 Māori lawyers I work with that even use our reo in the courts. And I wonder if they're ashamed to use our reo in the courts, because that in itself tells you how insidious racism and colonisation works, even on those that have so-called made it in the system. I was in a case last year at Whakatohia. There was 23 hapu arguing over a piece of important historical traditional territory. They all said they had this bit and that bit and that bit. And I've been arguing they all have those bits. They have shared exclusivity of those kaupapa. And the Crown has not been able to dislodge us or disrupt us from that shared exclusivity. But if we start painting lines in the land like Pākehās do, then we start putting lines in our mother. Papatuanuku, we start putting lines. I mean, you can't even put a line in Tangaroa and Hinemoana, because as soon as you put the line in, it starts becoming fluid water again. And we need to be more imaginative as we move forward in the next 20 years and stop this. And I've been part of those that go to court. I've been all the way to the Privy Council on the fisheries debate. I was the first Māori woman lawyer in the Waitangi Tribunal. I was the lawyer for the Te Reo Māori claim. I've watched us go up and down and roundabout, and the resources for the claim significantly diminishing over a period of time. I've seen bitter conflict as we talked about wedding dresses, and we talked about the mismanagement of funds, while actually our children are going to school without being fed. With buses and transport support being stopped for us to enable us to take our kids to Kohanga. With these limits of 60 parekura, meaning that people are still travelling 40 or 60 kilometres to get their kids every day to a kura if they want themselves to be trained in kura. And those are the realities, and we need to be onto it and set our own agenda to overcome it. We're not to let the Crown set that agenda. We are not to allow that. That is the way of the future. That is what He Whakaputanga and Te Tiriti contemplated. If you look at it, we were to meet somewhere in summer, have a parliamentary discussion amongst all of us as hapu and leaders, and we were to set an agenda each year for us. And that is what we need to do for the next 20 years. Because I plan to still be here in 2040 as we celebrate the Te Tiriti that was guaranteed to us, And we hopefully by that stage have fulfilled the dreams and aspirations and guarantees that we argued for in 1840 and most of us as activists have been fighting for. 60 years, some of them. I've only been fighting for it for 40 years, but all of the ones I've been talking about were 20 or 30 years older than me. And a lot of them have passed. I saw in the audience, some of the names that haven't been mentioned, Tom Tamaru and his wahine. Every year they would have a pilgrimage to Waitangi. Ngāti Porou was always here, fighting for kotahitanga. Te Pere Curtis came up here every year for Te Arawa. Him and Dawihungi fought for the right for us to control our marakai, for us to have control over our seeds. And we didn't come here a separate hapu. We came here to look for inspiration, to look for common strategies so that when we go home, we confront the racism, the bullying, the denial, the denigration, the lack of authority we have, and we use those strategies that we discuss here back in our own worlds. We also got to get trick in the way we deal with kawanatanga people, and one of the ways we're doing it is we're putting more Māori in Parliament. Those Māori in Parliament have also got to show some more understanding of the separate rights we have to our own systems. And they need to fund those, and they need to resource those, and they need to create the space for us to interface for those. I've been involved in the last 2 months with the Oranga Tamariki hearings. I can't talk too much about it. We filed closing submissions this week. But there's deep, deep anguish in Māori whānau. There's deep anguish in the survivors of our men who've been to jail, who have had abuse in Oranga Tamariki care since the 60s, and nothing is being done for them. We have this Royal Commission going on about state abuse, but our men aren't participating in that because they do not see the people representing them in that place as reflective of their own experiences. We need to stop isolating the men that have been perpetrators of the sexual violence that put them now in jail from the fact of the sexual violence and colonisation that was inflicted upon them when they were young men in their own whānau and separated from their mothers. We need to put the dots together. Hurt people hurt. And they are still hurting now. And we have the solutions to that, and we need the resources and a separate Māori authority to do that. And wahine mā, if you're asked to take a job on these boards, take the bloody thing. Because one of the things I'm worried about is men take the jobs. But a gardener's there again, he's my uncle. He must be just about 80, 77. Wahine mā, if you're offered the job, take the job. He took the job at TBK when he was 45. Don't think that you don't have the courage, the stamina, the inspiration, the ability to dream difference. You do. And that's what you need to find the courage to assert. And if you don't like what they're doing, don't let the Iwi Leaders Forum or your Runanga or your Marae Committee, it's everywhere, shut you down by their bureaucracies and their desire to keep everything silent. Your mana is yours. He mana heke iho, mai ngātua. Every one of us possess that. You cannot give that away. You cannot sell that away. And you certainly must share that mana. And that's what you all need to, I think, take away from me today. I love what Donna just said. Because we otherwise become strangers to our own values. And we actually suffer the very thing that they have designed their racism and their denial of our values to achieve, which is to have amnesia about the inclusion of our values in our everyday lives. And you also have to be honest. P is killing our communities. It's killing our communities. We developed strategies in the 70s and 80s. We all smoked that back then, and we developed strategies to manage that. But we haven't developed appropriate strategies for P. And those are some of the reasons that are causing the greatest harm to us. It's a trigger
the trigger to the violence between men and women, women and women, women and men. You know, one of the cases last year, which I was mortified, came out in that case in Oranga Tamariki, was a Māori woman abusing young men, boys at 15 and 16, to sleep with her, to have an initiation ceremony before they get released from SIFs. You've got to really be looking at what are the triggers for why you do that kind of sexual violence on our own taonga, on our own children. And some of that responsibility is us to deal with. The authority is ours to carry. And the Crown's got to stop blaming us for that happening and trust us to find the solutions and to implement them. Because there's a hell of a lot of women like me around that can actually get those things done. Moving on from Oranga Tamariki, I want to talk about water. I made a promise to my grandmother. She was the activist in our whānau. We come from a tribe in Hapu of Te Arawa who had all our lands confiscated. Not everybody was a kupapa, fellas, in Te Arawa. Some of us actually fought against the Crown. Our grandmothers were raped. One of her enduring things to me as a lawyer is we need to get back our waters, not to sell, not as a property right, but to look after. Healthy waters, healthy whānau, healthy communities. When you look at the most fundamental thing about your identity, called waikwe, why is in the middle. It's what you drink that gives you your identity. If it's the spiritual waters of Rotuiti like me, then that's where you're going to have your greatest identity. And yet the Crown still denies us the relationships and the authority over our water. And we're seeing more and more now systems of commodification of water that is actually making us sick. I couldn't believe what was happening down in the South Island this week. And then the privatisation processes that might happen. So we as communities have got to stand up and say we need mana whakahaere and authority as hapu and whānau over all our water. And we aren't matakliko. That's what I want to challenge these iwi leaders. I see Hami's gone. He always starts when he's on this. You know, iwi leaders keep saying, oh, it's a property right. Really? But it's more than a property right. It's a fundamental right to survival. Within that, we have an obligation to manaki, manaaki, to fill with mana, the waters to where the spirits of our tipuna lie, our ancestors lie. All of us do it. Donna, we aren't all piss-pot Pākehas. Even my father wasn't a piss-pot Pākehā. He was a farmer though, and those farmers are some of the worst polluters, and we need to make sure that what their practices are don't kill our waters. And we as Māori know the intimacy of those relationships, and this government and every government for the last 30 years has denied that we own or we have a relationship to water that is akin to ownership. And we as Māori this year and in the next 2 years must demand that they settle on those issues. And we must do it in a way that we aren't matapiko. We have to share. If I've got a Pacific Island neighbour living with me, of course I'm going to give them a drink of water. Of course I'm going to look after them. Why? Because they are our manuhiri. And we have an obligation as tangata whenua to manaki our manuhiri. So don't think just because you're going to get the water, that means you're not going to give it to everyone. But we need to sort those things out. So next agenda this year is water. Oranga Tamariki, primary moss wasn't the scalp we wanted. Okay? That's not the scalp we wanted. What we want is the power and authority to have rights over our children, to whānau or to be atapai, to mokopuna. That's what we want. And we need to find ways that can be achieved to give that power to hapu and whānau. And we've got to stop being hapu fundamentalists. I have to talk about this. We've got to learn to work together. And we need to find ways to work together. And that's what whakapapa does. You know, we've all got connections to each other. So we've got to, yes, the independence of your haputanga is important, but it only becomes powerful when you allow that independence to become interdependent with your whanaunga so that you have common objectives. my 20 minutes up yet, or I keep going? Okay.
Keep going.
Another big take for me is what happened at Waikeria. Now, I want to pay tribute to the Māori Party. I was on holiday in Tukumari Bay when I got a call from one of the guys on the roof. Can't name him, he's, get myself into trouble. I made calls to a whole lot of politicians, but Rawiri Waitangi actually answered my call, wherever the hell he was in New Zealand, and he went up. Now that's the kind of immediacy that we need to get kawanatanga responses to. I'm not saying the Labour Party didn't do that. I'm just saying that's a particular example of how the Māori Party responded to the crises of our people. He feared his life was going to be taken that night. And they thought about the value of the lives of those on the roof, and they mobilised to assist them. I hope we as the Māori world will mobilise to manaki them, because most of them are now being punished for what they're doing and could easily be forgotten for what they did. But all of us know that Waikeria was a dungeon. There were rats running around in it. If you've been in Waikeria, boys here know what I'm talking about. It's absolutely bloody disgusting. They should never have allowed our people to be caged in those kind of situations. And National, I'm going to blame the Greens, Labour, all of you had a hand in not getting things faster to prevent our people being treated like animals in those places. So that's what we've got to understand of what triggered their response. So those are the kinds of changes. I'm actually for changing the whole model of prison, the whole model of state care with our kids. But are we ready to take the responsibility back to our iwi? Because all I hear them talking about is making more money. Let's go and buy some more houses and make some more money. But they're not even putting our kids in their houses. And half the reasons why our kids can't get out of these places is they can't get a bail address that meets the needs of the court. And we're all doing the couch surfing thing because there is no housing for our people. So that's the other agenda this year. And we need to be kind. And if you're a landlord, stop asking for $500 from your bloody tenants. Start asking them for $200. And start helping them look after their kids. Because that's the real reason why people are stressed out. They can't afford to buy kite and look after their kids. Now I grew up with people, that's all we worried about was, do you have a kite? Come on, come over to my house. I was told by Sir Toby Curtis that I was actually a SIFS kid when I grew up. Because my nanny was at Hui's all the time and I ran from one house to the other at Tapuai Hararu. Right up till I was 6. Every house was my house. When I wanted a kai, I had a house there. I was never abused. Abuse didn't happen. If it did happen, there was going to be a big hui at the marae. Any woman got knocked about by an abuser partner, the hui at the marae. And my nanny would go with her rolling pin and really knock it in some sense to everybody about why violence is not helpful. And then try and figure out, why is it happening? Has he lost his job? Is there something wrong in the relationship? You can do that. You don't need iwi leaders to do that. Stop closing your doors and watching TV. Manaki, share. That's our agenda for this year. COVID, the last thing, provided a wonderful example of how Māori communities responded with manaki. No one expected money as they were running around with their masks on, feeding the kaumatua, looking after the kids. Nobody desired anybody to be hurt or made vulnerable or to be or to die. I was bloody annoyed with that legislation that suggested they needed police powers to come on marae during COVID. Why the hell did they need to do that? It's not as if we're going to be doing anything illegal while we're worried whether we're going to die or not. And if it is illegal, it's most likely something like having a joint so that we have a good sleep because it was so boring. So, those are the things that were happening, But I can tell you, COVID also brought back the values. Values to us as whānau. Values that were adopted by communities and then facilitated by resources from the Crown. And everybody, I think, I don't know, Hone is still not letting us kiss each other because of COVID, I don't know. But you should go to whoever's next door to you and you should give each other a hug. Because I really think COVID is the values that they've forged is our way forward. So tino rangatiratanga for me is, yes, it's about mana, it's about regaining power, and the Crown has to give back that power. Now, in the past we have advocated it in every way you can imagine. Wānanga, violence, let's become a republic. Fundamentally though, until this nation accepts that we as tangata whenua are deserving of the authority over those things that are ours, then we will be coming back at Waitangi every year till that's achieved. Every last breath of me will be devoted to that. And I hope it's not just me, because that's the other thing I want to emphasise. I'm sick of armchair revolutionaries on my Facebook page. Go in it, go sister, you're so good sister. Ka pai you sis, that's just, yeah. Okay, just go down there, come down and I'll see you afterwards. No, we're all revolutionary. We all believe that change is good and we all take responsibility. So on that note, everybody, I hope that's an agenda moving forward. The treaty created that wairua. It's the most wonderful forward-seeking document if you read it. It's about te tino rangatiratanga a o rātou nei kainga. People forget that. It's about maintaining authority over our homes, ngā taonga katoa, our children, our fish, our forests, our lands, the rights to survive as distinct peoples in our own places. We can all achieve that and let's all get on and do it. Okay? Yeah. Okay, cool.
Kia ora.